You have walked past it 1,000 times. A steel box, 40 feet long, painted some faded shade of red or blue or rust, stacked behind a Walmart, riding on a flatbed on the interstate. You have probably called it a shipping container if you bothered to call it anything. But you have never asked who built the thing. The answer is a North Carolina truck driver named Malcolm McLean, who in 1956 owned one of the 5 biggest trucking companies in America, and who deliberately invented the system that would destroy the kind of trucking company he built. His own firm went bankrupt 30 years later. His own shipping empire collapsed the same year. He died avoiding the press, ashamed of how many jobs he had erased, and the box he built is the reason your shirt costs $8 instead of $80. The reason your phone shipped from a city you cannot pronounce. The reason a town in Ohio does not make anything anymore. The story has 4 layers. Most people only hear the first. But let us start with what everyone gets wrong about the box itself. The surface answer is simple. McLean made ocean shipping cheaper. End of story. And the math is real. In 1956, loading a cargo ship the old way, men hauling individual barrels and bales onto the deck by hand, cost about $5.86 per ton. McLean's first containerized voyage cost roughly 16 cents per ton, a reduction of 36 times. A ship that took from 8 to 10 days to load could now be turned around in under a day. So why didn't anyone build this earlier? It's just a box. The Phoenicians could have built a box. The answer is that the box wasn't the engineering. The hard part, the part nobody had cracked in 3,000 years of shipping, was making hundreds of those boxes stacked 6 high on a rolling ship in open water without collapsing into the ocean. That problem was solved by an engineer named Keith Tantlinger, working out of Spokane, Washington in the late 1950s. Tantlinger designed 2 pieces of metal almost no one outside the shipping industry has heard of, the corner casting and the twistlock. The corner casting is the rectangular steel fitting on each of the 8 corners of every container ever made. The twistlock is the rotating pin that drops into a precisely shaped hole in the casting and seizes when you turn the handle. Stack a second container on top, drop the twistlock through, twist, locked. A crane can latch onto the same fitting and lift the whole stack at once. Without that one piece of metal, the container does not work at sea. With it, you can build a 40,000-ton load on a steel deck and trust it through a North Atlantic storm. But here's the part nobody tells you. McLean and Tantlinger gave the design away. They patented it, then made the patent royalty-free, available to every competitor. McLean needed the entire industry to adopt one standard, or his ships had nowhere to go. That decision is why every container on Earth, from any country and any year, fits in any port crane in the world. But cost savings and engineering, that is the part everyone tells you about. Here's what they do not tell you. McLean Trucking, in the early 1950s, ran 1,776 tractors out of 37 terminals. It was the 5th largest fleet in America. McLean had built it from a single-used truck he bought in 1934 for $120. This was the kingdom he had spent 20 years building. So why would he invent a system that would crush companies exactly like his own? Because he was not allowed to do both. The Interstate Commerce Commission, which controlled American trucking rates and routes, ruled in 1955 that McLean could not legally be in trucking and shipping at the same time. He had to pick, and he picked the ocean. He sold McLean Trucking for $6 million and used a $22 million loan from a young banker at First National City Bank named Walter Wriston to buy a fleet of beat-up World War II tankers. He bet everything on a system that didn't exist yet. And this connects to something sitting in your closet right now. But we will get to that. Once the box worked, the trucking industry he came from began to mutate underneath him. Long-haul freight, the protected, regulated, ICC-priced kind that McLean trucking had been built around, became something else. The container made every truck a feeder service for a port. Short-haul drayage replaced cross-country hauling on huge stretches of the coast. The fat margins from regulated lanes evaporated. Then, in 1980, President Carter signed the Motor Carrier Act, deregulating American trucking entirely. The number of trucking companies in America more than quadrupled in 10 years. Wages collapsed. Unionized fleets, including the one that still bore McLean's name, though he no longer owned it, started bleeding. On January 10, 1986, McLean Trucking ran out of money. Between 9,000 and 11,000 workers were fired in a single night. Drivers got the message by teletype while they were on the road. It was at the time the largest bankruptcy in the history of American trucking. That same year, McLean's flagship shipping company, United States Lines, also collapsed, over $1 billion in debt. Both wings of the transportation empire he'd spent his life building died within months of each other, partly killed by the same system he had built. McLean stopped talking to the press. He took the job losses personally for the rest of his life. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. McLean had seen this coming 20 years earlier on a dock in New Jersey, when he was still just a kid driving a truck. It is 1937. Malcolm McLean is 23 years old, parked at a pier in Hoboken, New Jersey, hauling cotton bales. He has been waiting all day, not because there is traffic, but because the longshoremen are loading the ship one bale at a time by hand, the way ships had been loaded for roughly 3,000 years. McLean watched this, and he reportedly thought one sentence that would change the global economy. Would it not be great if my trailer could simply be lifted up and placed on the ship without its contents being touched? He sat on the idea for almost 20 years, not because it was complicated, but because the system was rigged against it. The ICC denied him repeatedly when he tried to lower his rates. The railroads fought him, the shipping companies fought him, and the longshoremen's unions, who understood exactly what was at stake, fought him hardest of all. Here's how hard. On April 26, 1956, the day the Ideal X, McLean's converted T2 tanker, sailed from Newark to Houston with 58 35-foot containers strapped to her deck, an International Longshoremen's Association official reportedly looked at the ship and said that he thought they ought to sink the son of a bitch. He was right to be afraid. Before the box, loading a typical freighter took roughly 100 longshoremen working around the clock for a week. After the box, the same job took 40 to 50 men in less than a day. The math does not compress that. It detonates. The Port of New York employed somewhere between 35 and 50,000 longshoremen in the 1950s. By the mid-1970s, that number was around 3 to 4,000, a 90% collapse in 20 years. Manhattan piers shut down. Brooklyn waterfronts went silent. Cargo moved to Newark and Elizabeth, New Jersey, the only places with enough open land for cranes and stacking yards. Entire neighborhoods built around dock work. Red Hook, Hoboken, the west side of Manhattan, emptied out. The film On the Waterfront came out in 1954, 2 years before the Ideal X sailed. By the time the credits faded, the world it depicted was already on its way to being gone. And that's exactly why what you are about to hear should change how you look at almost every object in your house. Here's where the story stops being about a trucker and starts being about you. You have not made it through a single day of your life, not one, without touching the system Malcolm McLean built. The phone in your hand was assembled in southern China and shipped across the Pacific in a 40-foot container, lifted off a ship in Long Beach by a crane bolting onto Tantlinger's corner castings, bolted to a truck chassis with a twistlock, and pulled by a drayage driver into a warehouse you'll never see. The shirt you're wearing came the same way. The jeans on your legs, the wine in your fridge, the screws in your IKEA shelf. By 2016, Roughly 10 million truck-sized containers arrived at U.S. ports each year. Each one of them is McLean's box. Every Black Friday deal you've ever clicked is downstream of the box. Every 2-day Amazon delivery is downstream of the box. Fast fashion is downstream of the box. T-shirts can cost $8 only because moving a t-shirt across an ocean has dropped to roughly the price of a stamp. And here's the part that hurts. The hollowing out of American manufacturing is downstream of the box too. Before McLean, moving a factory from Cleveland to Shenzhen made no economic sense because the cost of shipping the goods back wiped out any labor savings. After McLean, the math flipped. Once any factory anywhere on Earth could ship anywhere else for almost nothing per item. The only thing that mattered was wages. And wages, as it turned out, were lower somewhere else. So here's where you actually land. You started this thinking a shipping container was a metal box. What you were actually looking at was the personal vendetta of a Depression-era trucker who got tired of waiting on a pier in 1937. The engineering of a Spokane mechanic who solved the stacking problem nobody had solved in 3,000 years. An open-source patent decision that locked the entire planet into one standard. The obliteration of 50,000 longshoreman jobs in a single port. The deregulation of American trucking. The bankruptcy of the very company Malcolm McLean spent his life building. And the substrate of every globalized supply chain on Earth. McLean did not invent a box. He invented the thing that ate his own world and built ours on top of it. He died in 2001, having stopped giving interviews. Container ships around the world blew their whistles in his honor on the morning of his funeral. You are not just looking at a steel rectangle stacked behind a Walmart. You are looking at the reason your shirt costs $8. The reason a Hoboken longshoreman's grandkid grew up in New Jersey instead of on a pier, and the quietest revolution the 20th century ever produced. And if you think the box is strange, wait until we get into why almost every product you own spent part of its life inside something even weirder, a refrigerated container that runs on its own engine and costs more than a house.